The clinking of silverware against porcelain carried through the room like delicate music, each sound weaving into the laughter of friends and family gathered around the long wooden table. Glasses of wine caught the light from the chandelier, glowing like jewels, and for anyone standing at the doorway, it would have looked like a scene out of a magazine. Perfect, warm, inviting. I sat at the head of the table, smiling, nodding, raising my glass when people toasted to love, to friendship, to another year of memories. And right there beside me was Emily, my wife, the woman I had promised to stand beside for the rest of my life. She was radiant as always, her laughter bubbling like champagne, her hand brushing mine every so often, as if to remind the world that we were a unit, unshakable and strong. But beneath my smile, my chest was tight. My mind wasn't celebrating. My thoughts weren't on the dinner or the laughter. Because while everyone else was lost in the glow of the evening, I was clutching something small, something that pulsed like a hidden weapon in my pocket, a black remote control. To everyone else, it was just another night of celebration. But to me, it was the beginning of the end. That little piece of plastic was connected to a screen behind me. A screen that, once turned on, would turn this cheerful gathering into a battlefield of truth. I looked at Emily as she laughed at a joke one of my friends made. Her smile was perfect, convincing. She leaned into me the way a loving wife should, playing her role without missing a beat. To anyone else, she was flawless, but to me she was a storm in disguise. And before the candles burned out that night, before the wine glasses were emptied and the laughter faded, every single person in that room would see her for who she truly was. Still, here's the question that might be circling in your mind right now. How did I get here? How did a marriage that once felt unshakable turn into this performance? How did I, a man who believed in forever, end up preparing to expose the woman I loved in front of everyone we knew? That's the story I need to tell you. And to do that, we have to go back, way back, to the moments when everything started to change. When I first laid eyes on Emily, it was like the world suddenly shifted into color. She wasn't just another person in the room, she was the room. Her laugh carried across the air, not too loud, but magnetic. Her presence demanded attention, and yet she carried it with such ease that no one resented her for it. She was radiant, yes, but it wasn't just the way she looked. It was the way she made you feel when you were near her. With Emily, I felt like I mattered. Like I was enough. We had those late-night drives with the windows down, singing along to songs we barely knew the words to. We built a home together, filled it with photos of trips, anniversary dinners, birthdays, and those silly little inside jokes that only we understood. Friends and family looked at us and said, "That's love. That's what it's supposed to look like." And I believed them. I believed in us. But perfection, as I learned, is fragile. It doesn't break with a bang. It cracks slowly, quietly, like glass under pressure. At first, it was little things. Emily started working late more often. I'd call her around 7, and she'd tell me she was buried under paperwork, exhausted, and not to wait up. I'd hang up, sigh, and reheat dinner, telling myself she was ambitious, driven, that it was a good thing she cared so much about her career. Then came the phone. Always face down on the table, always on silent. She used to toss it on the couch without a second thought, but suddenly it became an extension of her. If a notification buzzed, she'd glance at it quickly, almost nervously, before slipping it back into her pocket. Our conversations changed, too. They grew shorter, colder. I'd ask her how her day was, and she'd answer with a flat, "Fine." I'd crack a joke like I always did, but the sparkle in her eyes was gone. She used to laugh so hard she'd wipe tears from her cheeks. Now she barely smiled. At night, we lay side by side in bed, but it felt like there was an ocean between us. I reached for her once and she shifted, muttering about being tired. I told myself it was just stress. Everyone goes through phases, right? Relationships aren't perfect, but there's a difference between rough patches and silence, between distance and detachment. And though I tried to ignore it, though I forced myself to believe that this was just temporary, my gut kept whispering, something isn't right. Still, denial is easier than truth. And when you love someone the way I loved Emily, You'd rather wrap yourself in lies than face the reality that the person you trust most might be slipping away. So I ignored the whispers. I smiled through the distance. And little by little, without even realizing it, I started playing the fool in a show I didn't even know had begun. The turning point came on a night that should have been ordinary. Emily said she had a late meeting, something that had become more frequent in recent months. She kissed me on the cheek as she slipped on her coat, her perfume lingering in the hallway even after the door shut behind her. I wanted to be supportive, the understanding husband who didn't question his wife's ambition, but that night something in me stirred. Maybe it was the silence in the house, the way her smile hadn't reached her eyes when she left, or maybe it was just intuition finally refusing to be ignored. Whatever it was, I decided to surprise her. I picked up her favorite takeout on the way, imagining her reaction. I pictured her tired but grateful, smiling at me for showing up with dinner and love in my hands. That was the fantasy. The reality? When I reached her office, the building was dark. Not just dim, dark. Every window black, every desk empty. My stomach twisted as I stood in the parking lot, holding a bag of food that was quickly growing cold. I checked the time again. She should have been here. I knew she should have been here. With my pulse racing, I dialed her number. She answered almost instantly. "Hey, I'm still in the meeting," she said cheerfully, her voice smooth as glass. But to me, it cut like a blade. I froze. She didn't know I was standing outside her empty office. She didn't know I was staring at a building that told a different story than her lips did. "Still in the meeting?" I asked, my voice calm, careful. "Yeah, it's dragging on forever," she replied. But in her tone, just beneath the surface, I caught something I had never noticed before. A tremble. The kind of tremble you only hear when someone is walking the line between confidence and panic. That was the moment my trust began to crumble. I didn't confront her. Not then. Instead, I listened. And for the first time in our marriage, I knew my wife was lying to me. After that night, I couldn't stop seeing the signs. The late nights grew more frequent. Sometimes she came home smelling of perfume that didn't belong to her. It was too strong, too layered, too unfamiliar. She brushed it off as samples from the office or hugs from colleagues. I wanted to believe her, but every excuse sounded thinner than the one before. And then came the messages. Her phone would buzz on the counter, the screen lighting up just enough for me to catch half-hidden notifications, names I didn't recognize. Messages she swiped away before I could read. I told myself not to look. I told myself not to snoop. But betrayal has a way of revealing itself, no matter how carefully someone tries to bury it. And late at night, lying awake beside her while she scrolled endlessly on her phone with the brightness turned down low, I realized something painful, something undeniable. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, was keeping secrets. And those secrets were pulling her further and further away from me. We had installed security cameras around the house years ago, motion-activated, quiet, tucked into the corners where no one noticed them. At the time, it was about peace of mind, about protecting the life we were building together. I never imagined they'd become the key to unraveling everything. One sleepless night, as the clock ticked past 2 in the morning, I sat in the darkened living room with nothing but the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Emily was asleep upstairs, her breathing steady, almost too steady, like the sound of someone who had no idea her world was about to change. Curiosity gnawed at me, sharp and relentless. My mind kept circling back to her late nights, the lies, the perfume. I told myself I was overthinking, that I'd only make myself miserable digging for answers. But when trust is gone, even the smallest doubts scream louder than reason. With a trembling hand, I opened my laptop and logged into the camera system. At first, it was boring. Hours of nothing but shadows moving across the driveway, the wind stirring branches, the mailman dropping off packages. I fast-forwarded, skipping through time, my chest tightening with every flicker of movement, and then I saw him, a man, walking up to my front door in broad daylight when I wasn't home. His stride was casual, confident, like he'd done it before. Like he belonged there. I leaned forward, my pulse thundering in my ears. He didn't hesitate. He had a key. The door swung open, and there she was, Emily, my wife, smiling, welcoming him inside, and then the hug. Not a friendly hug, not a quick embrace, but the kind of hug that lingers, the kind that says, "I missed you." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. The room spun, but my eyes stayed glued to the screen. My hands clenched so hard around the laptop that my knuckles turned white. The truth was no longer suspicion. It wasn't a whisper in my gut or a guess in the dark. It was right there, in high definition, each frame of footage cutting me deeper than the one before. I sat frozen, unable to look away, watching the woman I loved transform into a stranger before my eyes. Every gesture, every smile she gave him felt like another blade sinking into my chest. And yet, I didn't yell. I didn't storm upstairs and demand answers, because anger gives them power. Anger makes you reckless, but patience gives you control. And that night, I made a choice. I wouldn't waste my pain in an argument behind closed doors. I would wait. I would watch. And when the time was right, I would let the truth destroy her all on its own. The weeks after I watched that footage were like living inside a mirror that only showed cracks. Every reflection was warped. Every familiar thing felt slightly off. Our couch, the wedding photo on the mantel, the toothbrushes in the cup by the sink. I moved through the house like a ghost, doing the motions of married life while the truth hummed under the surface, loud and impossible to ignore. Mornings were the worst. I'd make coffee, set 2 mugs on the counter, and wait for her to come into the kitchen with that tired smile. She would kiss me on the cheek, put on the same soft expression she'd worn for years, and say, "Have a good day." I would answer with the same hollow thing I'd told myself when I first noticed the signs, "You too," and watch her walk away. Each kiss, each "I love you," became another piece of armor I put on so I could survive the day. People told me I should confront her. Friends, family, even my own reflection seemed to ask why I was pretending. But confrontation felt too small. It felt messy and raw and likely to end with us in separate rooms, shouting with no clarity, just noise. If I exploded, if I let fury take the wheel, all I would get was a chaotic purge. She would deny, deflect, or maybe confess in a way that let her off the hook in front of everyone who mattered. I wanted something cleaner. I wanted the kind of justice that didn't feed her excuses, so I learned to play the longest kind of patience. I listened to the ordinary sounds of our life and cataloged what didn't fit. There were little things, socks left in odd places, a lipstick stain on a scarf she swore she never wore, laughter that ended as soon as I walked into the room. She believed these details were invisible. She believed she could keep this version of her life separate from the one we shared. There was also the way she moved when she thought I wasn't looking. Lighter, as if she had been practicing steps in the dark for months. Sometimes she'd pause at the doorway, fix her hair, check her phone with fingers that trembled as if holding a secret. She was careful. That much I admired in a bitter sort of way. She covered tracks so well that only someone who knew the house as intimately as I did could begin to see the pattern. In grocery stores, at parties, and even on family vacations, we wore the same costume we always had. Friends still assumed everything was fine. "You two are goals," they'd say, clinking their glasses, praising our togetherness. They didn't know about the footage. They didn't know about the man who used our back door like it was his. They believed in the brand of us I had worked so hard to maintain in public. Inside, I was changing. Deception does that, forces you to invent new parts of yourself to live in. I found solace in small victories, remembering the dates when she claimed to be working late, catching inconsistencies in stories, learning the cadence of her lies so I could speak around them. I became an archivist of her half-truths, cataloging timestamps and excuses like evidence in a case only I was building. But this wasn't about humiliation for the sake of it. It wasn't about vindictiveness. The thought of exposing her felt cruel if it satisfied only a private rage. I wanted something harder and purer than revenge. I wanted the truth to clear the air, to end the pretense not as an act of spite but as a surgical reveal that left no room for doubt. I wanted the people who mattered to see the choice she had made, unvarnished and undeniable. That meant planning. It meant patience. It meant rehearsing how I would hold myself when everything I had believed was being rerun on a screen. I practiced calmness the way an actor rehearses silence, because real power lives in a steady voice and a slow hand, not in the flaring of temper. If I played my hand too soon, she would reinvent her story. If I waited too long, rumors would have already spread, and the sting of discovery would lose its sharpness. So I built a stage. Not a dramatic stage with lights and cameras, though in a way it would be that, too. But a setting where the audience would be those whose opinions and faces mattered most to us. Friends, family, people who had watched our life unfold and formed opinions about us as a couple. I wanted it public enough that her defenses would falter and private enough that the room would feel like a courtroom. I wanted every face in that room to reflect back the simple word I needed to pronounce: betrayal. She thought her affair was clever. She thought it was safe. She thought I was as blind as she had been practiced at making me. But secrets, no matter how carefully arranged, have a way of sharpening into visible things when someone decides to point a light at them. I had found that light. And for the first time since I'd felt the first tremor of suspicion, I felt something like calm resolve. I would not confront her in the dark. I would not let this be another round of broken promises. I would make sure that when the truth came, it came in a way that didn't allow for the soft edges of denial. So I smiled at breakfast. I kissed her cheek goodbye. And in the quiet between one glass clink and another, I began to plan the night that would change everything. Planning revenge is its own kind of work. It's quiet. It's methodical. It's the opposite of the fevered, loud moments people imagine when they think of payback. I didn't want a scene that would be remembered for shouting or chaos. I wanted something surgical, precise, inevitable, and terrible for the person who had broken the rules of our life. First, I chose the guest list. Not strangers, not loud, opinionated acquaintances who might distract or turn it into a circus. I invited the people whose faces mattered the most to Emily, friends who had toasted our engagement, cousins who had clapped at our wedding, a few of her co-workers who admired her professionalism. I wanted faces that believed in the story she'd told the world because it would make the reveal cleaner. Their surprise would be my witness. Their disappointment would be the two-handed thing that made the truth land heavy. I worded the invitations like any other host. Casual dinner, this Saturday. Come around 7. Dress nice. Emily loved those nights. She would fuss over the tablecloth, pick a playlist that sounded effortless, and choose a dress that made people look twice. She lived in that zone where she was always on stage, polished, in control, practiced. That night she would bring the costume. I would bring the lights. When you decide to expose someone, timing is everything. Too early and it looks like a bitter reaction. Too late and it becomes gossip someone else tells first. I picked a Saturday in late autumn, when the daylight dies early and candles give you that soft, believable warmth. I scheduled it for dinner because people let their guard down with food and wine. They talk more easily, they laugh, they lower their walls. That looseness would help the reality sink in like a stone dropped into still water. The house needed to look ordinary. A confrontation staged in a living room full of tension looks like a movie. It loses the moral weight I wanted. I wanted the ordinary. Familiar furniture, that old rug, the framed photos on the mantel. So each of those normal things would act like a contrast to the abnormal truth that would appear on a screen. People trust their living rooms. It makes betrayal feel closer and the betrayal feel worse. Under the TV stand, where no one would bother to look, I hid a small media box that could pull up the security footage. I'd synchronized it with the main television and tested it twice. I'd practiced the click and the pause and the volume. I knew exactly how much of the footage I wanted to show, no more than necessary but enough to remove every shadow of doubt. I didn't want to humiliate beyond repair. I only wanted undeniable proof. The box stayed quiet and invisible. In my pocket, the remote was a small, hard secret, cold plastic that trembled slightly when I held it. I thought through the flow of the night the way a director maps out a scene. Drinks first, Champagne to loosen people up, then wine when conversations started to weave. I chose the playlist and then cut the music out, slowly, the moment before the reveal so the silence would make people lean in. The lighting would be warm, not theatrical. Candles on the table, the overhead dim. I wanted the room to feel intimate, like a confession could happen at any time. I practiced my voice in the mirror, too. Not to rehearse words of accusation, no, I wanted to rehearse stillness. I practiced smiling in a way that didn't give me away. I practiced the calmness that reads as control, because telling a room the truth in a steady voice is different from shouting it. Temper tantrums give the accused a stage to perform denial. Calmness takes that stage away. I planned the seating arrangement like a chessboard. Emily across from me, naturally, the center of the table and the center of attention. Her closest friends on either side, so they would see her face clearly. My sister near the end, a woman whose expression always told the whole truth before anyone else had a chance. Her coworkers were placed so their faces would turn toward the screen the moment it flickered. I didn't tell anyone why I'd seated them that way. I told everyone it was just how it worked out. I didn't want a whisper of suspicion to spoil the night. There were smaller details, too. A napkin folded just so, the right amount of wine in each glass, a dessert that could be pushed aside when people got quiet. I checked the cameras one more time during the day and re-watched the clip on mute until it felt like a piece of furniture I could move into the center of the room and set down without trembling. The footage itself became less shocking each time I watched it. The shock was saved for the people who hadn't seen it. That, I decided, would be the cruelest kindness. I told a few small lies to ensure attendance. "We don't get to see Mark and Lisa enough. Come celebrate," I wrote to friends. Emily hugged me and laughed when she read the list of names, tapping her fingers on the table as she imagined the night would unfold. She fussed with candle placement and hummed a song while she set the plates. Her joy felt like salt on an old wound. All the while she was busy perfecting the performance, I kept my routine, ask about the wine, compliment her dress, laugh at the jokes. To anyone watching, it looked like the same happy couple they'd known for years. To me, it was like carrying an unloaded gun in a crowded room. Dangerous, because it only needed one moment to change everything. And then the night came. Guests arrived with casseroles and bottles of expensive wine. Laughter filled corners and conversations flitted from job stress to harmless gossip. People shared small memories. "Do you remember when—" And the room softened. Emily basked in it. She loved their attention more than anything I'd ever seen. That pride made the wound deeper. She was proud of the life we'd built, blind to the fact she'd been hollowing it out. When the main course settled and the candles burned low, I waited. I watched the way she smiled at compliments, the way her fingers traced the rim of her glass. Small, normal gestures that made the reveal crueler because they were so ordinary. I felt my chest steady. I felt calm, and in that calm there was a strange, hard relief. One press of a button, and the ordinary would not be ordinary anymore. One press, and the living room would become a courtroom, and their faces would become jurors. I kept the remote nestled in my palm, the click already rehearsed in the quiet of my mind. There are moments in life where time stretches like taffy. You can feel every second as if it is an hour. That night, while candles guttered and laughter warmed the room, I felt each heartbeat in my chest like a drum roll. I told myself to breathe, to speak gently, to let the truth do the work. I told myself that when the screen came alive, nothing anyone could say afterward would erase what they had seen. I picked up my glass, stood, and let the silence find the room. The plan had been built from small acts of patience and careful cruelty. Now it was time to turn the page and see how the story would end. Dinner had been perfect, too perfect. The kind of night where laughter fills every corner like warm light spilling from a candle. Where people lean back in their chairs with wine glasses in hand, believing the world is still soft and good. Even I almost believed it for a second. Almost, and then I stood up. "Everyone," I said, my voice steady but carrying a weight no one could miss. "Thank you for being here tonight. I just wanted to share something special, something about trust, and the importance of honesty in a marriage." I lifted my glass slowly, feeling every set of eyes on me. Emily smiled at me from across the table, confused but still performing, thinking this was some sentimental toast. That smile was the last moment of safety she would ever have in that room. I clicked the remote. The TV behind me flickered to life. At first just static, then her, Emily, on the screen. Walking into our home with him, smiling, touching, betraying. For a heartbeat, no one made a sound. Forks hung in midair. Wine glasses paused just short of lips. The footage rolled on, grainy but clear enough to leave no doubt. Emily's laughter on the screen was a sound that, once, had belonged to me. Then came the whispers, gasps, the sharp crack of glass hitting the floor as someone's drink slipped from their hand. I didn't look at the guests. I looked only at her. Her face had drained of color, eyes wide and glassy. She opened her mouth, stammering words that didn't fit together. This isn't... But the footage kept playing, each frame louder than any excuse she could make. The man's hand on her back. Her kiss. The way she led him down the hallway. The living room around us grew colder with every second of silence. Emily stood up, reaching for me, for the remote, for anything. But the screen was relentless. There was no escape. No carefully spun story, no charm. Only the truth projected in front of everyone she cared about, and I stayed silent, calm, letting the footage do the work. Letting the lies burn under the spotlight I had built for them. In that moment, she wasn't just my wife. She was the actress in a play whose script had run out. And I was no longer the fool in the audience. She begged me to stop. Her hands trembled as she reached toward the screen, her voice cracking under the weight of desperation. "Please, turn it off. This isn't what it looks like!" But the tears streaming down her face told the truth long before the footage did. The flawless mask she wore so carefully, of the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, shattered into pieces in front of everyone she wanted to impress. I didn't stop. I let the footage run its course, every second hammering her lies deeper into the walls around us. The room was still, so still you could hear the faint hum of the TV as it exposed everything she tried to hide. Not one person moved to comfort her. Not one person spoke in her defense. And when the screen finally faded to black, I looked her straight in the eye. My voice was calm, almost steady, though inside my chest thundered like a storm. "You thought your affair was a secret," I said, "but secrets always find the light." The silence that followed was heavier than any words could be. Chairs creaked as people shifted uncomfortably. Some avoided her gaze, others stared with quiet disbelief. But no one pitied her. Emily's sobs filled the room as she fumbled for her coat, her dignity unraveling with every hurried movement. She left that night not as the admired, polished woman she had pretended to be, but as someone stripped bare, humiliated, and exposed. Her reputation was in ruins, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the fool. I was the one who finally let the truth speak louder than the lies. In the weeks that followed, the house felt quieter, emptier. The echo of footsteps seemed louder, the silence stretched longer. But strangely, in that emptiness, there was also peace. The weight of her lies no longer pressed down on me. The shadows that once lived in every corner of the home were gone. The divorce papers came quickly. She didn't fight much, perhaps because she had no fight left in her. Her lover, the man she risked it all for, vanished the moment the scandal touched daylight. Friends who once adored her stopped returning calls. Colleagues kept their distance. Even family turned away, embarrassed by the spectacle she had created. And me? I rebuilt. Slowly, painfully, but with a strength I never thought I had. Every morning I woke up without the fear of another lie waiting to ambush me. Every night I slept without suspicion gnawing at my chest. Healing didn't come overnight. There were mornings I still caught myself reaching for her side of the bed. Evenings when I replayed her laughter and wondered how it had ever sounded so genuine. But pain has a way of reshaping you, hardening the weak parts, teaching you to see clearly where once you were blind. Sometimes revenge isn't about shouting or anger or even hatred. Sometimes it's about patience, about letting the truth speak for itself. Because the truth doesn't whisper. It roars when the time is right. And that night at the dinner table, It roared so loudly it shattered the illusion forever. I walked away not as a man broken, but as a man freed. A man who had lost something false, only to gain something real. Clarity. And clarity, I've learned, is the first step to any new beginning. So, what's the lesson here? It's simple. Trust is fragile. Once broken, it can never be made whole again. You can try to patch it, smooth it over, pretend it didn't happen, but the cracks always remain. Lies may hide in shadows for a while, but the truth is patient. It waits for its moment, and when it finally steps into the light, it doesn't whisper. It shouts. Emily thought she was living in a secret world, protected by her cleverness and charm. But secrets are like fire. You think you control them until they grow too big, and then they burn everything down, leaving nothing but ash and regret. She gambled everything on deception, and in the end she lost, because betrayal never wins. Truth does, always.